Welcome everyone to the Red Raider Report and our continuing coverage of game week, the big one, Texas Tech, Texas. And right now I'm pleased to be joined by Adam Zuvanich. And Adam, you've spent some quality time via telephone conferences with the #1 team in the nation this week. You know, how's their mood coming into this really huge game against Texas Tech?
Well, the Longhorns appear to be confident, and rightfully so. They've been the #1 team for 3 weeks. They beat Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout to vault to #1. Really whooped up on Missouri, I think in a game a lot of people thought was going to be close. And then, they were able to survive a very close game against Oklahoma State last week in Austin, 28-24. It got a little hairy at the end. Oklahoma State almost, marched down the field and rallied to tie it. Texas was able to get a couple defensive stops, remain unbeaten. The interesting thing, you talk to some of the Texas players and Mac Brown, they know it's going to be a challenge. This is the 4th straight game where they'll face almost a top 10 opponent. I think Missouri was 11, but they're still going. They've been the #1 team for 3 straight weeks. I believe they were unanimous again in this week's polls. They're a confident group. They seem excited about coming to Lubbock, but they also know it's going to be a challenge.
And Adam, you talk about Texas. Every year they have a plethora of talent, and this year they have an outstanding defensive end. Rylan Reed from Texas Tech talked about earlier going up against Mr. Arakpo. He is really a specimen to see in person.
He is. Ryan Palmer called him a beast yesterday on the Texas teleconference. Arakpo had a lot of good things to say about Rylan Reed. Rylan Reed benches 625 pounds, which is a Texas Tech record. Here's Arakpo. He benches 515 pounds, squats 600. These guys are both very strong, big bodies, great players at their positions. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Arakpo went up against Phil Loadholt from Oklahoma a few weeks ago, managed to sack Sam Bradford twice. Last week he went up against another great left tackle, Russell Okung from Oklahoma State, was able to get a sack on Zach Robinson in that game as well. Arakpo right now leads the Big 12 in sacks, leads the Big 12 in tackles for loss. He's up among the national leaders. He's really doing a lot for the Texas defensive front. They have some other good players up there,
right.
Lloyd Miller, Henry Melton, the other defensive end, who actually was kind of more of their goal line back the last few years, came in as a fullback. Now he's playing defensive end, doing really well. Roderick Muckleroy, linebacker, leads them in tackles. This is a team that's been able to put pressure on opposing quarterbacks, which has given their young defensive backs a chance to grow up and play well. And I think that's really going to be the key matchup that'll probably decide this game Saturday, is who can win that battle between Tech's offensive line and the Longhorns' defensive line.
Yeah, speaking of that, be sure and get on RedRaiders.com. Tomorrow there's going to be a nice feature you wrote on Mr. Arakpo on there that you guys can check out, as long as a little profile on McKenna Dixon and Brandon Williams. And, as you move on with Texas, eventually the attention has to focus on this, Adam. They have the leading Heisman candidate. He's running away with the trophy right now in a lot of national media and minds. How is Colt McCoy coming into now his 4th big game in a row? How's his mood this week?
Right, well, Colt McCoy, I think it's been pretty steady. He'll tell you that he doesn't care about these individual awards. He's not worried about that. He just wants to win football games, and that's exactly what he's done. He's been the most accurate passer in the nation in terms of completion percentage. He's also the Longhorns' leading rusher.
Right, and that's a rarity.
7 touchdowns, over 400 yards. So he's doing a lot of things for Texas right now. He's getting the time to throw the ball. They've got some really good receivers, Juan Cosby and Jordan Shipley. Those are seasoned guys, have great skills. McCoy, he seems to like playing against Texas Tech. He's had 2 good games against them.
Right.
2 years ago, as a redshirt freshman, he came to Lubbock. Texas got down 21 points. McCoy rallied him back, ended up winning 35-31. He's got a lot of friends here. He's a West Texas kid, so he seems really excited about coming back to Lubbock and playing in this game.
Okay, and Adam, we'll close here on the issue. You talk about stretches, key runs in the season. This for Texas Tech, it started last week at KU, and this is just a murderer's row with Texas, Oklahoma State, and eventually Oklahoma. Whereas Texas, on the opposite hand, this is closing a 4-game streak where they've won 3 very impressive ball games, and now this is the 4th. For Texas, is there any urgency there, knowing that this might be the last big test before an eventual run of the national title?
Interestingly enough, Mac Brown talked this week about how they're not looking at this as the last of a tough 4-game stretch. They're looking at as the beginning of a tough 4-game stretch to end the season.
Right.
Now, after this, they've got Baylor, which is kind of an up-and-coming team in the South, but they're still not quite there yet. And then they go to Kansas, which was ranked until Tech, completely clobbered them last week. So that could be a tough game. And then, of course, Texas A&M, which You know, they haven't really shown much this year, but they also have a two-game winning streak over the Longhorns, having beaten them each of the last 2 years. You know, a little bit of that, I think, is just kind of trying to be politically correct,
right,
and not put too much into that. But,
right.
You know, so I think the Longhorns can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, and I think we could have maybe said this at the beginning of the season. Saturday night in Lubbock, Texas, is probably going to be the toughest test the Longhorns will face this year.
Right.
They're facing another undefeated team. You know, who knows what might happen? You know, Lubbock, Jones Stadium has been the site of many an upset win for the Red Raiders. You know, you look
right.
at the Oklahoma game last year. So I think this is really, if Texas wins this game, they should be undefeated going into the Big 12 championship game.
Right.
But that's a big if. I think the Red Raiders are going to give them a fight. If Texas is still undefeated, they will have earned it.
Okay, you know, and we're going to tease people. We're not going to let you give your pick just quite yet because we want you to check back later in the week on Red Raiders, and the man himself, Don Williams, will be back a little later in the week. And get back on here tomorrow. Check out RedRaiders.com. We'll have continuing coverage of Texas Tech. For Adam Zuvanich, I'm Zach Long. This is the Red Raider Report.